Do you know what particularly torments me? I continued, my words full of rage. What torments me is the way you acted. I saw the way you took into your mouth, the way you sucked with a look like it was all you wanted. I saw you dutifully swallow everything after him, and your look at that moment was full of satisfaction. It was terribly humiliating for me.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes. Dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
My life was shattered that night when Gina offered to invite another man into our bed. There was nothing more shocking and humiliating than to see my wife, with whom I had spent 10 years, sink into the arms of another. When she suggested it, her voice was full of determination and her eyes full of fire. I was stunned, but my love for her and my desire to save our marriage made me agree to this horrible experiment. That night I found myself not only a spectator but also a victim. I watched Gina lose herself in the pleasure Carter was giving her, and every moment of this perverted show only deepened my inner anguish. My feelings were mixed with anger and humiliation, and I realized that despite my best efforts, I had become a helpless witness to her infidelity. Now that the emotions had subsided and the passions had receded, I found that none of the earlier promises and hopes mattered. That night I saw her true face, a face that not only betrayed me, but showed me that everything I knew about our love was a lie. The decision to leave was not just a choice, but an inevitable step toward reclaiming my self-worth. I never thought my life would change because of a simple question. But that night, when Gina, my wife, asked it, I felt the foundation of my entire reality crack. We were sitting in silence, immersed in our usual evening rituals, when Gina suddenly broke the peace. I noticed that her eyes were glowing with a strange, almost sinister gleam that I had never seen before. We were celebrating a decade of our marriage, and although the evening was full of warm words and memories, I could feel the tension in the air. Suddenly she turned to me with an expression that combined both determination and something dark. Ben, her voice was unusually serious, her words seeming taken out of the context of our quiet evening. You know that I've always craved novelty and thrills. I thought that maybe we should try something completely different to feel the excitement again. Her eyes met mine and I felt everything inside clench. I was ready to dismiss her suggestion as a joke, but when she continued, her words struck me with their openness and boldness. What if we invited another man into our bed? It might add passion and newness to our lives that we might be lacking. At that moment I realized that everything I knew about our marriage could be shattered in an instant. Ben, have you ever considered that there might be other pleasures in life besides the ones we have? Her voice sounded strange. This wasn't just a curious conversation. It was a challenge I hadn't expected. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Gina acted like she was discussing a weekend plan with her husband, not something that could ruin everything I knew and loved. I thought we should try something new, something that might bring us closer together, refresh our relationship. She looked at me with such a gleam in her eyes, as if it wasn't just a suggestion, but a revelation. I want to invite another man into our bed. My feelings and thoughts collided in a chaos I couldn't immediately comprehend. The suggestion seemed impossible, disgusting, and exciting all at the same time. I looked at Gina, trying to find some clue that might explain her words. But her eyes were full of determination. Are you serious? My voice was nothing more than a whisper, shaking with excitement. Yes, Ben. I'm really serious. I think this could be an interesting and new experience for both of us. I knew I should say something back, but all the words seemed wrong. I loved Gina, and that love was so strong that I was willing to go to any lengths to keep her happy. And so, driven by emotion and love, I agreed. That night we invited Carter. This man was a stranger to both of us, but there was a certain aura with him that was mesmerizing. We met him at one of the expensive hotels in the city where every detail had been thought out. I remember my shoulders tensing when we entered the room and I saw Carter in his confident posture. Then something began to happen that I couldn't have imagined. What I saw changed my perception of Gina, revealed a different side of her to me that I had never seen before. I noticed Carter immediately. His self-assurance and attraction was almost physical. Gina was like a mesmerized woman. I felt like an unnecessary witness, part of a different life than I had imagined before. With each passing minute I watched my wife become different, revealing herself and showing herself in a new light. I couldn't look away, no matter how hard I tried to hide my feelings. That night, Gina showed her true face that I might not have wanted to see. I was stunned by what had happened and the way my own feelings came crashing down on me, plunging me into an endless stream of reflection and doubt. Perhaps this night was not only a test for our connection, but a turning point for our understanding of each other and ourselves. We entered the room and I could feel the tension building. Gina was enthusiastic, her eyes glistened with excitement, and I could see her heart beat a rhythm of anticipation. All three of us sat down in the padded chairs and Gina turned to me and said with a smile, "Ben, you need to relax. It's going to be okay." I nodded, though my inner state was far from calm. Carter seemed to feel at ease, as if this was his usual environment. He walked over to Gina, gently touching her shoulder, and her body trembled slightly at his touch. "Do whatever you can to make her feel special," I told Carter, trying to hide my confusion under a mask of benevolence. A storm of emotions raged inside me and every minute was tearing me apart. Gina stood up and walked over to the champagne table, pouring herself a glass. She looked like she'd been dreaming of this moment for a long time. I watched her hands shake as she handed the glass to Carter. He accepted it with a slight chuckle, and I noticed Gina looking at him with admiration. "Can we get started?" she asked, her voice full of impatience. Carter nodded and walked over to her, while I remained standing to the side, feeling completely superfluous in this process. As soon as Carter touched Gina, I saw her tense up and then relax, as if everything that had gone before didn't matter anymore. His hands were experienced, confident, and every reaction she had to his touch was like a small discovery for herself. I watched Gina begin to sink into a state of total pleasure. Carter was attentive and tactful, but Gina seemed to be completely under his spell. Not only was she giving herself to him, but she seemed to find some deep satisfaction in it that I couldn't understand. I saw something in her eyes that shocked and upset me. It was as if she had forgotten about me, as if I no longer mattered. Carter started with light kisses that became more and more passionate and insistent. Gina, in return, responded with growing delight, and her lips were now full of passion, her body arching in response to his touch. I watched her breathing become ragged, her eyes closing in pleasure. I felt like a shadow standing against the wall while Gina gave herself completely to Carter. Their bodies intertwined in a strikingly intimate and erotic scene that I couldn't take my eyes off of. I was shocked to see Gina begin to scream with pleasure, her voice getting louder and louder, her body trembling as Carter continued to straddle her and immerse her in this insane sensation. Gradually, as if that was the only possible outcome, Gina not only gave herself to Carter physically, but completely emotionally. I noticed the way she whispered his name, the way her body trembled under his touch. I was amazed that she seemed completely oblivious to me, as if I was merely an observer of her new reality. When it was over, Gina seemed absolutely ecstatic. She hugged Carter, her face joyful and peaceful. I felt my own reality crumble, as if the whole meaning of our time together with Gina had been called into question. I was so stunned that I couldn't gather my thoughts. That night had shown me the real side of Gina, passionate, unstoppable, living only for her pleasure. I realized that even after so many years together, I had only known one side of her, the one she had shown me when we were alone. My feelings of betrayal were so strong I could barely hold back my tears. I saw that Gina had found something in Carter that she couldn't find in me, and it left a deep wound in me that was impossible to heal. That night was not only a test for our marriage, but a reflection of how deep a person's hidden desires and needs can go. I felt my world being turned upside down, and everything that once seemed stable and secure was now shaky and unreliable. As the night drew to a close and Carter left us, Gina looked peaceful, but at the same time with a kind of anxiety in her eyes. I could feel my rage and betrayal building up, and as soon as Carter was out the door, I couldn't help myself. "What the hell did you do?" I exploded, unable to control my emotions. My voice was full of pain and frustration. "You were like a whore. You didn't even think of me when you did all that." Gina turned to me abruptly, her face full of surprise and resentment. "Ben, you have no right to talk to me like that. I told you this was our experience, that we were both supposed to participate." "Participate?" I almost shouted. "You were completely absorbed in it. You forgot about me, and that was the most humiliating thing for me. I was just a spectator in this scene that you were having fun in." Gina looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "You don't realize how important this is to us. I've been trying to do something for us to bring back the passion we had in the beginning." "Bring back the passion? Oh, you just enjoyed it. How could you do that without even thinking about how it would affect me?" I was on the verge of breaking down. I was willing to do anything for you, but this is just humiliating. Gina sighed, her shoulders shaking with suppressed anger. You don't understand. I was being sincere. I wanted us to experience something new together. That doesn't mean I don't love you or that you've become less important to me. Less important? You showed me yourself that I'm not important to you, I continued. You were completely immersed in it, as if I didn't even exist. That's not only cheating, it's a betrayal I can't forgive. Our conversations continued, growing sharper and more painful by the minute. The atmosphere in the house was saturated with tension and mutual recriminations. Every conversation, every attempt to discuss what had happened only aggravated the conflict. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything that had gone before was now torn to shreds. I began to avoid Gina as much as I could. Our evenings became a silent neighborhood, and during the day we pretended nothing had happened. My inner world was thrown into chaos, and I didn't know how to rebuild what had once been solid and reliable. Gina tried to communicate, offering to talk about what had happened, but each time her attempts ended in nothing. I was too depressed and upset to accept her excuses or apologies. I felt that she had betrayed us both, and this deception was so deep that not even time could heal the wounds. A few weeks passed and our interactions became even more strained. Mutual recriminations and grievances piled up, and every conversation turned into an argument scene. We were like two people who didn't understand each other, trying to hide our emotions under a mask of calm. I tried to focus on work, to seek solace in my hobbies, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I knew about Gina was false. Our bond seemed to have been undermined forever, and despite trying, we couldn't return to the stability and love we had before that night. Gina, for her part, was feeling as depressed as I was. Her attempts to mend the relationship seemed unsuccessful, and she realized that her own actions had led to the destruction of what had once been valuable. We were both trapped in our own emotions and mutual resentments, not knowing how to get out of this destructive spiral. This period was a turning point in our marriage, showing how easy it is to destroy what had been built up over the years. A sequel might look at how we may have tried to deal with the aftermath and what decisions we made in this difficult situation. Several weeks passed after the nighttime incident with Carter shook the foundations of our marriage. The atmosphere in the house remained strained and every day seemed like a struggle. We tried to maintain a semblance of a normal relationship, but it only increased the distance between us. One evening when I got home, I noticed that Gina was unusually agitated. The same gleam burned in her eyes that I had seen before that night. She walked over to me, her hands slightly trembling with excitement. "Ben, I need to talk to you," her voice was serious, but there was a note of hope in it. I sat down on the couch, feeling the anxiety hit me again. "What else? We've already discussed everything we can. I'm not sure there's anything else to say." "No, listen to me please." She sat down next to me, and I noticed her eyes were full of determination. I realized that night was difficult for both of us, but I can't stop thinking about it. It felt incredibly good, and it wasn't just about physical pleasure. I realized that I could give us both what we were looking for, if only you'd give me a chance. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling irritation and bewilderment overwhelm me. "I mean to suggest that we invite Carter again," she said without averting her gaze. "I know how that sounds, but I feel like if we try it again, we can make it something special for you to experience as well. I want it to be good for both of us." My feelings at that moment were mixed. I was shocked and puzzled by her suggestion. "How can you think this is a good idea? You know how I feel after the last night." "I realize how it may sound, but I'm sure we can find a balance. We can discuss how to do it in a way that accommodates both your needs and mine. It's important to me that you're happy, and I want us both to enjoy it." I looked at Gina, and saw in her eyes a genuine desire to improve our situation. Although the suggestion seemed absurd and painful to me, I couldn't help but notice that her intentions were to repair the relationship. "And what are you suggesting?" I asked, feeling my heart beat faster. "Let's invite Carter over again. But this time we'll discuss everything in advance and consider all of our wishes. I want you to feel comfortable, and I want this night to be a pleasure for both of us." I was silent for a long time, feeling the inner conflict tearing me apart. I understood that this proposal was unusual and risky, but I also realized that Gina genuinely wanted to make a difference in our lives. I was willing to consider it, despite the complexity of the situation. "Okay," I finally said, sighing heavily. "If that's what you need, we can try it. But this time, please make sure you consider my feelings as well. Gina nodded, her face lighting up with a hopeful smile. Thank you, Ben. I promise I'll do everything I can to make it right. Slowly we began to prepare for this new endeavor, discussing the details and trying to find a way to make this night more satisfying for both of us. We communicated with Carter, explaining our expectations and hoping it would help us avoid the problems we had last time. And so that very night came. We met up with Carter again, and I noticed how confident and calm Gina seemed. My anxiety was mixed with anticipation, and I realized that this time would be something new, completely different from what we had experienced before. That evening when we met Carter again, the air in our house was permeated with tension and anticipation. Gina and I tried to act normal, but I could feel the internal tension building with every moment. We chose the same hotel as last time, confident that the familiar surroundings would help us through this difficult ordeal. When Carter entered the room, he was as cocky as the first time. His presence was powerful and noticeable, and I could see Gina reacting to him with the same delight as before. The glint in her eyes that had bothered me so much was back. "Hi Ben," Carter said, his voice calm and confident. "Gina, you look amazing." "Thank you," Gina replied, her voice full of warmth and anticipation. She walked over to him and ran her finger along his arm, her touch soft and inviting. We sat down in the padded chairs and I noticed Gina and Carter exchanging glances full of meaning that I couldn't ignore. My heart beat faster, and I felt anxiety take over again. I tried to remain calm, but my thoughts were full of excitement. "Ben, I want you to know that I really want to make this night special for both of us," Gina said, her voice full of sincerity. "I'll do my best to make sure you experience the pleasure too." I nodded, even though my inner fears and anxieties were unspeakably strong. Gina walked over to the champagne table and poured glasses, offering one to Carter and myself. I took a glass and took a sip, trying to relax. But the alcohol couldn't completely drown out my feelings of discomfort. Carter had started with light touches, but this time it was different. He was more confident and insistent, and Gina seemed even more open and liberated. Her movements were fluid and free, and she accepted his touch and actions with ease. I watched Carter begin to kiss Gina, his lips sliding over her neck, shoulders, and breasts. Gina responded to his touch with obvious delight, her body relaxing and arching under his hands. I watched her close her eyes in pleasure, her breathing becoming more and more intermittent and uncontrollable. My feelings were mixed. I was devastated and depressed watching my wife give herself to another man with such enthusiasm. I felt like I was just a spectator in this intimate scene, and my own role in this night was almost insignificant. Carter was not only attentive to Gina, but he displayed a confidence that I could not dispute. He knew how to induce maximum pleasure in her and used all of his skills to accomplish this. Gina seemed completely absorbed in the experience. Her body and voice spoke of the pleasure she was experiencing. As Carter removed her clothes, I noticed that Gina became even more open and relaxed. She wrapped her arms around him, her hands sliding down his back, and I could hear her breathing getting louder and louder. She was totally immersed in the moment, her eyes full of passion and delight. Carter began to thrust more intensely, and I could see Gina finding more and more satisfaction in it. My sense of dissatisfaction and pain deepened with each passing moment. I felt like I was losing touch with Gina, as if her attention and desire was completely focused on Carter. As Carter and Gina reached the height of their pleasure, I noticed Gina screaming with pleasure, her body shaking with ecstasy. I was shocked at how deeply she was immersed in the experience, and it left me with the feeling that I was completely excluded from her life. When it was over and Carter left, I felt exhausted and drained. Gina looked satisfied and calm, but I noticed that her gaze had become even more complex and multidimensional. We sat in silence, and I could feel the tension enveloping us once again. This night was another test for our marriage, and I realized that we were continuing to move to the edge of a precipice from which there was no easy way back. This night further deepened the rift in our relationship. We both faced the fact that our expectations and reality were incompatible. The sequel could explore the aftermath of this experience and how it affected our future. After Carter left and the room door closed, the tension in the room became almost palpable. Gina was sitting on the edge of the bed, her body naked and her breathing still ragged from the pleasure she had just experienced. I watched her, feeling my senses simmering beneath the surface. "Ben, please, Gina began, but I interrupted her. "Stop it, Gina." I exploded, my words full of rage and pain. "You were a total slut tonight. How could you act like that? Her eyes rounded in shock, and I noticed her face turn pale with shame and confusion. Ben, you don't have to say that. We were trying to do the right thing, to make us both feel good. Yeah? So what was right about you letting Carter do whatever he wanted to do to you? I continued, my voice growing harsher. I saw how you gave yourself to him completely. How you savored his touch, how you closed your eyes in delight as he kissed and caressed you. I saw how you literally vibrated with pleasure when he was with you. Gina tried to say something, but I was so consumed with my anger that I couldn't stop her. You were absolutely ecstatic when he took your clothes off. I saw you completely immersed in the experience as he caressed every part of your body. And I couldn't do anything but sit there and watch you let another man give you everything you said you needed. You don't understand, Gina started again, but I interrupted her again. I don't understand? I've seen everything I needed to understand. I shouted. You literally screamed with pleasure when he was inside you. And it was all in front of my eyes. I had no place in that scene except to be a spectator. You were completely oblivious to me, to what I was feeling. Ben, I didn't mean to, Gina said, her voice full of tears. I thought it would help us, that it would improve our relationship. Improve? I laughed angrily, my voice full of bitterness. You didn't improve our relationship. You've ruined it. You showed me that you didn't just want a new feeling, but something you didn't have with me. And I can't take it anymore. Gina jumped up from the bed, her body shaking with tears. Ben, I apologize. I know this has been hard for you, but please try to understand. Do you know what particularly torments me? I continued, my words full of rage. What torments me is the way you've behaved. I saw the way you took into your mouth, the way you sucked with a look like it was all you wanted. I saw you dutifully swallow everything after him, and your look at that moment was full of satisfaction. It was terribly humiliating for me. Gina tried to come toward me, but I stepped back, unable to bear her approach. You lay on the bed and openly waited for him to penetrate you. You told yourself you were ready, and when he started to move, you cried out in pleasure. You moaned and screamed like it was the best moment of your life. You were wriggling so hard and putting your body under his action that it was obvious. You were enjoying every moment of it. And it was right in front of my eyes. How could you give yourself to him so easily? I continued, unable to hide my pain. I watched you dissolve completely in his arms, as he filled you, and you seemed to lose all boundaries. You weren't just participating, you were consumed by it to the very end. And now I realize that everything I thought about our intimacy was a lie. You've changed everything I knew about you, and I can't live like this anymore. Gina stood in front of me, her face in tears, and I could see her struggling to find the words to justify herself. But nothing could change what I saw and what it did to me. My decision was final, and I couldn't stay in this relationship any longer. I looked at her, determination burning in my eyes. Understand? After spending the night in another man's arms, it's hard for me to understand what we even have left. I can't and don't want to live with someone who gave herself so easily to another man. I felt my heart clench with bitterness, and the decision I had made seemed clear and inescapable. I can no longer continue this relationship. We won't be able to rebuild what has been broken. I've decided to leave you, Gina. Her face paled even more, and I could see her torn between despair and the desire to fix things. But my decision was firm. I could no longer live with the sense of betrayal and humiliation this night had left in me. I'm going to leave, I said, my heart heavy but determined. And I'm not coming back. I need to be alone to get through this. Gina stood with her head bowed, her tears falling to the floor. I could see her going through every word, every action. But my decision was final. I couldn't continue this relationship, knowing that its foundation had been shattered and undermined in this way. As I left the room, I felt the full weight of this decision weighing down on me. That night had been the end of something important, and I realized that now I had to move on, to build my life anew. My heart was filled with bitterness, but I knew that this was a necessary step to move forward.